Okay, so we are moving on today to constraints part 3. I had originally told you there were 4 parts to this. That was wrong. There's actually 5 parts. I've broken it into 5 parts to make it a little bit easier to follow along. So this is going to be part 3. So we're going to start off like normal. Open up our data panel. Make sure we're in IED Designs. Open up our Unit 1 folder. And we're going to go over to our design area and click our file and save. We will call this 1.3.3 Constraints Part 3. Okay. And we're going to click save. Once we have that started, we can close our data panel to give us a little bit more room. We want to make sure our document settings are set to millimeters. And we want to make sure our view cube is set correctly as well. Once you have all of that in place, we're going to go ahead. We're going to draw a 10-sided polygon again. But this one, you don't need to worry so much about the dimensions of it, but you do need to follow along with the same shapes that I do. Does not have to be the same dimensions though. So if I do a straight line, you need to do a straight line. If I do a diagonal line, you need to do a diagonal line. When it's finished, they should look very similar. So I'm going to start off with my XZ plane. And we're going to create a sketch. Again, we're on our XZ plane. Okay, I'm going to use lines. We're just going to use the line tool like we have been. First thing I want to do is open up my sketch palette, make sure everything that's supposed to be checked is checked. So slice and 3D sketch are the only two that should not be checked at this time. I also want to go down here to this menu, and you want to go to this icon here. It says grid and snaps, and you want to make sure snap to grid is checked. Okay. So as long as all that's good, we are good to go. And then I'm going to draw a line on my x-axis, and I'm going to cross over the origin point when I do this. Again, the actual dimensions and size of what I do is not as important. Step 5, we'll go in either 4 or 5. We go in and we force in the actual dimensions that we want. Right now, we're focused on the shape and the geometric constraints. So I'm going to click. I'm going to drag all the way over. I'll go to about here, and I'm going to click again. That's going to give me line number 1. And you'll notice when I did line number 1, there's a horizontal constraint that was automatically applied. Okay, now I'm going to go up to do line 2. So I'm going to go straight up from that point. Just find a area that I want to click. I'll click. That's going to be line 2. When you did line 2, you should have had this perpendicular constraint placed in there. If you did not get that, you need to go back and redo it. If you accidentally click out of your line tool, and now I can't do line 3 automatically. If you accidentally do that, you can just go up to the line tool up on the toolbar, and then you'll just need to click on the point at the end of the last line you created. So now we're going to do line 3. I'm going to click there. I'm going to go ahead and drag out a little bit. And click. Again, you should have a perpendicular constraint there. So if you're not getting the constraints that I'm talking about as we're doing this, you need to stop and redo that step before you move forward. Okay, now we're going to go on to line 4. Line 4, we're just going to do a diagonal line. Actually, I'll do it like that. Okay. And no specific constraint here for this one. So diagonal line. Now we're going to go up to line 5. I'm going to go straight on up. When I do line 5, there should be a perpendicular constraint that goes to line 5 and line 3 at this point. Line 6, we're going to go slightly off horizontal, just a little bit, not a whole lot, just enough so that we don't get that horizontal constraint right now. So I'm going to go slightly off. You should have no constraint force there. Okay, So now, as we're moving forward, we're going to go to line 7. Sorry, line 7. Make sure I'm in the right area. Then we want to do line 8. We're going to go back and put some constraints in here in just a moment. Line 8, then we're going to go out to line 9, and then we're going to join back at line 10 there. Okay, so this is what it should kind of look like at this point. We're going to go and make some changes. So the first, all the way up to line 5, all of those constraints should be good. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see a little bit better. So I don't want these perpendicular constraints over here on line 7. So I'm going to, first off, I'm going to click OK to end my line tool. I'm going to click on this perpendicular constraint, left click, right click, and delete. And then same thing with this one. I do not want perpendicular constraint there. So at this point, you should have the horizontal. You should have a perpendicular here, perpendicular, and then you should have perpendicular with 3 and 5. Notice when I highlight, when I scroll over 3, 5 also highlights. Those are together. Now what we want to do, we want to put a parallel constraint for 7 and 5. We want these two to always remain parallel. So I'm going to click on my line 7. I'm going to go on up to my constraints. I'm going to find my parallel constraint. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to click line 5. And you'll notice that the parallel constraint's there. I'm going to right click and click OK. That will take me out of that constraint tool. Next thing I want to do is I want to have line 8 perpendicular with line 4. This is line 8. This is line 4. We want them to be perpendicular to each other. So I'm going to click on line 8. I'm going to go up to my perpendicular constraint. I'm going to come down here to line 4, and they are now perpendicular. Okay. Then we are going to enforce a parallel constraint on 9 and 3. So I'm going to go over to 9. I'm going to go up to my parallel, not the equal, the parallel constraint, and then I'm going to click on 3. And OK. So at this time, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 constraints in the same places that they are on mine. Okay, if you do not have that, you need to kind of go back in the video a little bit and make sure you did things correctly. Okay? If you have some extra constraints in here, you can just go ahead and delete them out like we did up here with the perpendicular. Now that we're at this point, one thing we want to do is this shape, line 2 and 10 should always be parallel to each other. Well, just by looking at them, you know they're not going to be parallel to each other. If I move 10, you can see that they intersect. So that is not the definition of parallel. So what we need to do is now we need to put a parallel constraint for 10 and 2. I'm going to go to 10. I'll go up to my parallel constraint, and I'm going to click on 2. I'm going to click OK. Now, whatever I do to the shape, 2 and 10 will always stay parallel. Okay. So if I go like this, 2 and 10 will always stay parallel. So that one's good. Next thing I want to do is line 6 should be parallel with with our x-axis, sorry. So line 6 should be parallel with our x-axis at all times. And again, you can tell it's not, because if I pull 6 down, it's going to intersect, and it's not always going to stay parallel. So we need to highlight 6, go up to our parallel, and then we're going to highlight our line 1. And the reason why I'm saying line 1 is because we created line 1 on the x-axis. If you did not create an x-axis, that's going to be an issue. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and click OK. Now we want lines 5 and 7. We have them parallel, but we also want them to be the same length. If I take this point right here and I pull it down, line 5 is not changing along with it. That's not what we want. Remember, this is all about design intent. That's why we're using this. I want to be able to, anytime I change line 7, line 5 is going to be the same and vice versa. So I need to highlight my line 7. I'm going to go up to my equal constraint, and then I'm going to highlight line 5. And click OK. Now, anytime I change line 7 in length, line 5 is changing along with it, so that they're always going to be the same length. Okay, let me go back like that. Okay, so that's good. Now, there's one more thing that we want to make sure for the design intent on this. We want lines 3 and 9 to align horizontally so they move up and down together. So basically, we want them to share the same line. We want them to constantly move together. So the fact that I said horizontal, you're probably thinking we need to use the horizontal constraint. However, that will not work. And I'm going to show you here. If I click on line 9, and I go up to my horizontal constraint, you can see I get an error that says sketch geometry is over constrained. That means we have too many constraints of that type in there. We can't use that. So what we're going to need to do is I'm going to highlight 9. I'm going to go on up to constraints. I'm going to have to click on this arrow here to open up some other constraints that we can't see on the toolbar. And we're going to go into collinear. We want to click on collinear. And you can see collinear means that it constrains 2 or more objects so they share a common line. So that's what we want to be able to do, because we want 3 and 9 to be horizontal, move up and down together. So they're going to share that same line. So I'm going to click there, and then I'm going to click on line 3. And I'm going to click OK. Now if I move line 9, line 3 is moving along with it, and vice versa. Okay. So now we want to double check and make sure everything is moving like it's supposed to. So 2 and 10 should always stay parallel. So if I move 3, yep, 2 and 10 are parallel. If I move the corner here, yep, 2 and 10 stay parallel. So it seems like no matter what I do, 2 and 10 are going to stay parallel. So that one's good. Line 6 should always be parallel with our line 1 or our x-axis. So if I move some things around, no matter what I do, they're going to stay parallel. So that's good. Line 5 and 7 should always be the same length. So I'm going to shorten up 5. Oh, look at that. 7 shortens too. So that's good. And then we want to make sure that line 3 and 9 move together. Whenever I move one, the other one moves along with it. So that's all good. At this point, we are done with this particular shape, and you can go ahead and load this into Canvas as part 3.